Working on my 2003 Honda Civic today, and I'm going to be replacing the thermostat. With the thermostat, I need a thermostat gasket. That's this guy right here. And I'm also going to replace the radiator switch. This connects to the thermostat housing. This tells the radiator fans to turn on when it senses high temperatures. In my experience, I always buy this part brand new. In the past, I've cheaped out and I've gone to the junkyard and I've pulled these parts out of older Honda Civics, and I've pulled out 4 and they were all faulty. So from now on, I buy these parts brand new. Okay, so I got the radiator fluid dripping into my tray. It was actually really easy to open it up. It's a plastic wing nut. You just undo it a couple of times, and it's in this corner of the vehicle. And to make it flow a little bit better, I'm opening up the lid here. Of course, you want to make sure that your engine is cold before you open this up. You don't want to get hot radiator fluid splattered onto your face. Whenever I replace antifreeze coolant, I always use this stuff. This particular type of fluid is made for my car, a 2003 Honda Civic LX 1.7 liter. It's blue in color. In my experience, whenever I put Prestone or some of those aftermarket type fluids, I always blow a hose afterwards, that stuff that you mix. In an 03 Honda Civic, the thermostat is right here. Now, I've already drained out the radiator fluid in the system, and I see that there's only 2 10mm bolts holding this thing on, and I can't seem to get my wrench on that particular bolt right there. So instead of taking these plastic clips out, I think I'm just gonna bend this piece of metal, because I only need to move it over to the right just a little bit, and then I'll be able to get my socket onto that screw. I think I'm gonna have better luck with bending this than removing these plastic clips. I think I'm gonna break them if I try pulling them out. I'll try and see what happens. Okay, bending the bracket worked. I only needed to bend it just a tiny bit. Now I can get my ratchet on it, and I'm going to be able to get this out without removing those wires, unclipping them. I've got the harder nut out, the one that was obstructed by this clip, and now I'm working on this second nut. This nut's easy to get to. Yeah, I did it. I got it out. This is the old thermostat, and I made sure that when I pulled it out, I took a good look at it. This little guy here lets some of the water through. I can't remember exactly why it lets some of the water through when the thermostat is closed and the engine is cold and it's starting to warm up. But I am going to make sure that when I put the new one in, this little guy is oriented up, and then I'll slide the new one back in. Okay, so I've got the housing out. Now I've got to get the radiator fan switch out of the housing. So I've already loosened it. What I've done is I've brought it over to my vice grip, and I placed the nut inside the vice grip. I'm taking my pry bar, putting it in, and that's how I got the nut loose. I suppose I could have loosened the nut before I removed the housing with a wrench, but I didn't try that. And this technique I just used worked very well. It came out very easily. If you don't have a vice grip, you might want to try putting a wrench on and loosening this, loosening it first. That way, you know, this is in place, and it might work for you that way. I've got the new radiator fan switch on the housing, and the next thing I'm going to do is clean the crud off of the back of this so that I don't have any leaks. And I'm going to clean all the crud off of that as well before I put the new thermostat in place. I'll use a flathead or a razor blade to clean it off. I'm using a small flathead to clean the crud out before I put the new thermostat in. A small flathead is the only thing, or the only tool that I have that is going to fit here. Okay, I got the new thermostat back in. I've got the radiator thermosensor, some people call it. I got this bracket in that's holding the wires. It was great that I could just bend this a little bit. The most important thing about putting it back in was the orientation of the thermostat. That little flap thing that lets water through, that tiny little hole, must be at the very top. And if you look directly straight onto the engine, that little flap needs to be oriented precisely at 12 o'clock. Otherwise, it's going to be real hard to get this thing back in. I need to put the hoses back on. I need to fill this thing back up with coolant, radiator fluid, and I should be good to go for a couple of more years. When it comes to checking the overflow tank level, it's really difficult in this Honda Civic. You just can't see it down there. What I do, I got a little trick here I'm going to show you guys. I keep some wire right here attached to my battery, and I'm just going to straighten out the wire, and I'll show you what I do. I've got my wire all straightened up. I've got the lid off, the cap off the overflow reservoir. There's my wire on the ground all straight. I'm going to just pick it up, and what I do here is I use the wire and I use it as a dipstick, and I just let it go all the way down till the bottom's out, and then when I lift it up, I can see at the very bottom it's wet, so that means my overflow tank is a little bit low, and I'm going to add some radiator fluid to it. I got my wire back in place. This is where I keep it. For those of you who don't know, there's a valve on this cap, and there's a little tube right here that shoots water into the overflow tank when the engine gets hot. When the engine gets cold, water in the overflow tank gets sucked back into the radiator system. That's why it's so important to have this thing, you know, with some radiator fluid in it. If you when you remove these bottles and look at the bottom portion, there's a minimum level and a maximum level, so the levels fluctuate in the tank. You want to make sure that there's some fluid in here, and you want to make sure that you replace this cap every once in a while to make sure that the valve is working. It's an important part of keeping your engine cool in the summer. Well, I got the thermostat in, and there are no leaks on this. Make sure that when you guys are installing this screw here and that screw right there, that you go gentle. I think I'm putting those bolts into aluminum, and if you don't have a torque wrench and you over tighten it, you could do some damage. So go easy on an aluminum block. And yeah, I've tested everything. The sensor here, that brass piece of metal that you see, it when the engine gets hot, it turns the fans on. So yeah, no leaks. The fans are coming on and off, so this was successful. These are the tools that I used to complete the thermostat job. This guy here is a long 10mm, and I also used a pry bar when I changed the thermo switch, the switch that controls the radiator fan.